Bless you.
Thank you.
I'm glad I don't have the gavel in my hand because nobody has the power in this room. We just hear information, basically.
Let me get some extra chairs, I'm sorry about that.
Now, if you wanna... Okay. I had in trouble putting slides together, which I thought would be helpful to bring all the information to one place. I will explain some of the slides. It's not meant to be a one of the lectures I used to give when I was teaching. So the first page. Sarah, can you share the screen?
Yes.
First of all, I want to welcome everyone who is here. And I want to welcome our guests who are on the screen. And I will explain how the meeting will go. And then...
Which one do you want me to show here?
No, forget the pictures. I want...
The presentation?
Presentation.
Okay.
At the last Land Use Committee meeting on November 4th, Mr. Leffler was here, presenting issues of concern to him and his neighbors, and he requested that a subcommittee be established, and it was. And Chuck Merdler, who is chair of the Land Use Committee, is on our screen somewhere up there. Chuck appointed a subcommittee. 3 of the members are here right now. We're waiting for the 4th. Adriana Rivera, Bob Bender, and myself as chair of this subcommittee. We then took upon ourselves to go take a walking tour on November 11th, 1 week later, to get the sense of what buildings they were talking about, what the conditions were that they were talking about, and to get some sense of what we could or could not do. Since then, I've been in contact, as I promised I would do, at the community board meeting the following night. I asked the captain to look into the situation described on Stevenson Place relative to overnight drug sales. I'll get back to that in a while. On whichever day, November 13th, 14th, the letters went out. One of these slides has the content of the letter. The same letter went out to everyone we invited. You have a list there of who was invited. Unfortunately, number 3, the principals of Innovative Property will not be here. Neither will the Department of Buildings or the Department of Sanitation. We've been in contact with all those people. I was in contact with the ND a number of times, and they apparently are off this week for the holiday. And all of them allegedly, I'm not saying allegedly, all of them are on family vacations. And I think it was Jack again who confirmed that they are not in the city, or will shortly not be in the city. There's a lot of correspondence, some of which I'm sharing tonight. Now, item number 6 is brand new to me. I received an email yesterday, perhaps Farah, I mentioned Farah, who's a member of, who's our district manager and director extraordinaire, working on the keyboard. And so she passed on to me a piece of correspondence from the Deputy Director of Bronx Forestry, which apparently is going to walk through. We have to set up a date. I have no idea exactly what they plan to do, but apparently they're going to be looking at certain trees and decide on the city end trees need replacement or removal. I can't tell you anything more than that until we have that meeting. And then Mr. Leffler was nice enough to, I'll say Alba, was nice enough to forward to us a document that I'm a little distressed to learn was not written by Karen Argente, which is what I thought it was. And Karen, all due respect, there was a document that a grant was given for the Fort Independence Cultural Research Survey done in 2011, which I found fascinating. I want to get back to that specifically as we go forward. So for tonight, I want to divide this into 3 sections, tonight's agenda, and I want to keep it to time limits. So even though we may not come to conclusions, we should leave before Friday. I want to make sure we make Thanksgiving. So for the first half hour, I've taken a bit of that time. First half hour, I want to introduce Dan, who is now present with us, so the entire committee is here. The first section we want to talk about, 4 of us want to debrief on what we saw and just share ideas. And then I want to open it up to those who are present here and those who are on screen who may be able to offer us more information than we presently have. And then after we've had this open session, then for the committee to meet, and only the committee to participate in deciding what as a committee, our next steps are. We certainly know, and I'll show you later, so our next step is to report back next week to the Land Use Committee. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Just 2 more slides. What you have here is the content of the letter that was sent out to everyone. And then you have, you move up 2 slides. 3 slides, keep going, 1 more. Okay. So we want to talk to the innovative properties, the owners of several of the sites in that area. We want to talk to the leadership of the Van Cortlandt Jewish Center. We've been in contact with DOB. We have to be aware of city zoning. The developer has rights, property rights. And then what I did not do, there's 2 things I didn't do from what was requested. I didn't get in touch with DEP yet, and I didn't get in touch with Cortlandt yet. I will do both. And then as far as we're concerned, we have a land use subcommittee. Next week, the land use committee meets. Hopefully, we'll report to them, give them some idea of what our findings are, and then we'll report following week to the community board. And then we'll be in contact with the various agencies. So that's where we are right now. So to start the discussion on our debriefing, I want to tell my fellow committee members that I drove past the facility again yesterday, and we saw work going on with a fence going up or whatever. But if you have any books to go back to that library, they're not there anymore. Period. They're not there anymore. I was surprised, shouldn't have been, but I was a bit surprised to see that. And the next slide, just for argument's sake, this is the map which I scribbled all over, and I put in the little green boxes, cover some of my scribbles. I would have been smart to have asked Albert to send me a second copy of this that was clean, and I've been smart also not to have written that all over the map. But this will give us a framework. So I come to the committee now. Are there any comments you want to share concerning our visit?
Well, I mean, not beyond what you already said, Marty. You know, we were surprised to learn that there was, seems to be a drug problem on Stevenson Place, and as you said, you brought that to the attention of the captain.
And 2 follow-up letters.
Okay. And there seems to be a building there that looks like it could hardly be in conformity with the buildings code, based on what we could see through the window, and that issue is also going to be discussed further.
Stevenson Place.
Yeah, the building on the corner where, on Stevenson Place, where, you know, with the narrow rooms that looks like it's turning into an SRO. But, you know, so there are some real issues there. And of course, all the big questions about what's going to happen to some of the properties that haven't been sold yet, or we're told have not been sold yet. So, you've laid it all out.
And Deanna, anything you wanna? We covered the first half hour very quickly.
Yeah, I think also what just concerned me is learning about what could happen if the bedrock is not careful to be taken care of. About like the runoff that might possibly happen and what might happen to the reservoir wall as well. So concerning, but I think we're talking to DEP about it.
Will be.
Let me just clarify one thing. We did discover, we all thought we were talking about a reservoir wall, but we did discover on the site visit that the wall on Stevenson Place is not the reservoir wall, it's the wall for Fort Independence Park. The reservoir is farther back. So, I mean, you know, not that anybody wants to see that wall damaged, but it's, you know, there's a magnitude of difference between the park and the reservoir. So that issue, which was a concern going in, I think, we have resolved.
And you,
Has raised her hand too, maybe too.
this is first, committee first, then we'll open it up. Dan, you looked into the zoning. Is there anything you want to share at this point?
I mean, nothing that is in here is sort of right. Because it's R6, I mean, they can as of right build something pretty big. You know, as of right. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that it's a commercial overlay that they're not taking advantage of either. I mean, they're replacing the library and there's not going to be, I mean, at least in this plan, there's not any community space, there's no retail space or, you know, a place for a preschool. I mean, like, any of that would be nice. And it's like you're building a whole new building, like, and you even can have, like, storefronts here, you know, and it's sort of like, I know, right, if you can't fight it, like, at least, like, could it be, like, better for the community, better for what it's replacing than just for the people that are going to maybe move in there? So, you call for people, not me.
So I'm going to section 2 now. Now, before I call on the person who raised her hand, the question that's sitting on all of our heads is, what's the status of the synagogue building?
We're in negotiations.
That's what the membership was told.
Me? Sorry, I'm a member.
This is about for long-standing, and I had no idea because they don't tell anything to the membership. It's more of our problem than yours, but it affects how this development will be carried out.
We had a meeting in May, a special meeting to look at the choices of how to be done. We presented at that time what we were planning, including the general layout of the hopes of what the future would look like. The people who feel that this is not what should be done had an opportunity to speak as well. At the end of the presentation, there was a long pause, for about 5 to 10 minutes, during which people were congregated in the back telling Louise Salant to make a motion, and Louise Salant was saying we don't have enough members to carry it. That went on for several minutes, at which point I made a motion, which was passed. I'm looking for the exact wording of it because it's been reported, incompletely reported in the press. I've had conversations with Mr. Stoller, during which he has said he's going to do everything he can to sabotage the plans.
I didn't say that, you
You
lied.
gotta let the chair call on you if you want to.
My apologies.
And the motion was, I move that the membership of the VCJC endorses the current plans finalized with an Innovative Development Corporation to sell the property.
Let's vote, please.
I move that the membership of the VCJC endorses the current plans finalized with Innovative Development Corporation to sell the property and then become tenants in a renovated facility. Membership understands that any final agreement between the parties will require the membership's explicit approval. The membership further directs that actions by members to prevent, sidetrack, or sabotage these plans cease and desist. We had retained a lawyer on the recommendation of an associate of Mr. Stoller. And as part of a conversation with Mr. Stoller, I acknowledged that some of his input, such as the name of that lawyer, was valuable, and we were going into them. That lawyer has since received email from Mr. Stoller and other members saying they want to get together with the lawyer to redirect what we're doing, and they are not happy with the directions we're taking. So, ultimately, the vote on that memo, motion, sorry, was 27 in favor, 8 against. The change that has happened since then is, rather than planning to do tenants on a rental basis, negotiations are not going to be provide a mitigant for the space that would be the synagogue's renovated building, with a possible addition of an apartment that we would use for either a rabbi or officiants for the holidays, or, for example, yeshiva university students who would be resident most of the year and would assist in tasks for the synagogue. There's a way forward for the synagogue. What has been said to me by Mr. Stoller and others in this group was that we have to have affordable housing or senior housing, that the amalgamated is raised its rent, but people can't afford to stay there. The seniors need someplace to go, so we need to provide space for them. That the innovators plans to have market rate housing, therefore it doesn't meet his needs. And he's objecting on the basis of the type of housing. None of the objections he's raised to me are based on environmental impact, or bus routes, or water supply, or electrical supply, based on the type of housing. The whole question of senior housing or affordable housing versus market rate was discussed last time Stu and I were here in the meeting. And it was the sense of the committee, as we heard it, that market rate was perfectly acceptable. It is the feeling of the board of the synagogue that market rate would be better both for the neighborhood and for the future of the synagogue. Senior housing certainly would not be good for the future of the synagogue. We already have a majority of senior citizens as our membership. Further, if we were to try to address the amalgamated issues, their issue is now, there's not going to be any senior housing that we build available for at least 3 or 4 years. So it's a red herring. Our plan is to go forward with what the board has strongly endorsed, with what the membership has voted on, and we are not sharing blow-by-blow details with the membership. Some of the membership has objected to that, and they are right, we are not. But we feel it is in the best interests of getting the best outcome that the negotiations be essentially confidential. There are terms in the proposed contracts that say they will be mutually confidential between the parties. That does not exclude the membership, certainly. But as was expressed by a member who's a lawyer who's not a member of our board at our membership meeting in June, the way things are supposed to work is the board gets elected by the membership, which is the case, and it is entrusted by them to get their things done and take care of them. And it is not expected that a blow-by-blow and item-by-item daily accounting be relayed back to the membership, because therein lies chaos. But we are not doing that. We have issued some reports, but not many, and we feel that is the appropriate way to work. Have I answered your question?
To a degree, yes.
Oh, be glad to expand on what I've missed.
Well, what I've missed, either you or Innovative were here and offered to the Land Use Committee a design intent on what was going to happen, and a lot of us thought it was going to happen. Apparently, we're back past step one.
No.
The
design is
building housing above the synagogue, maintaining the synagogue.
Above the centric portion of the building. And the space that is now our main sanctuary and ballroom will be slightly shrunken, subdivided, and converted to sanctuary, offices, meeting rooms, ballroom space, and the like. And that will constitute approximately 5,000 square feet, which will be now condo. When it was presented to you at that time, the discussion was tenancy, as a lease, not as an owner. As a result of the May meeting, one of the things that was changed, and one of the things I relayed to Mr. Stoller, was that we were indeed going to be able to attain condo rather than lease, and this was one of the things that he and his associates felt strongly would be much better for the long term, for the longevity of the synagogue.
Just for disclosure purposes, I have used the sanctuary and the ballroom. My wedding.
No? Great.
There was a hand on the wall first, and there were two hands in this room. So I can't see from here.
Eb,
Hey, Marty, it's Deb Travis. I just wanted to, just on the earlier point that Bob made about the fence or the wall of Stevenson. When you talk to DEP, let's just confirm, because, yes, it's the wall of Fort Independence Park, but the water itself of the reservoir, has an embankment that is holding it back. And so my understanding is that a lot of that land is part of the actual structural element of the reservoir going up to the wall underneath Fort Independence. So let's just confirm that one way or the other. I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, well, I haven't contacted DEP yet, but I'll certainly raise that. The question of how that wall interacts with the reservoir wall. There was a hand on this line. So you are Mr. Stoller?
Yeah. I'm trying not react to Jack's snideness. I'm not sure how much you want to get
We
into.
just not use that vocabulary. We're here to talk to each other.
I'm not sure how much you want to get into synagogue politics versus the use of the building. But when we first got together, my associates are sitting behind me, we were the ones who gave Jack and Stu the idea of condo and of getting him an attorney who knew what he was doing, in a spirit of cooperation. There's been, my great-grandmother was a member of the synagogue, as was my grandmother, my mother, and I, so we've gone back a ways. And there's all this information I'm hearing now about where housing is, none of this was shared with membership. When Jack says, we don't need a daily report, I'd like a monthly report. I'd like a report. I'd like to know what's going on. I'd like to know why, from the information we have, the price they're getting from Innovative is considerably lower than it should be according to our understanding. When I say our understanding, it's because we don't get any information from them. In fact, they denied membership to, I think, 4 members at this point, including one who'd been a member for a long time, and his grandfather was a family member, because they said directly to him, we don't want influencing the vote. So this has been a kind of a little shell game. In terms of getting what we want that property to be, it goes back to what Dan was saying. We know there's going to be housing there, of course, and the city needs housing. But the need for affordable housing, rather than market rate, seems to be more of what we're talking about. That's one. Two is the synagogue housed a daycare center and JASA Senior Center, which were told, as JASA specifically, months in advance that they had to get out, which forfeited thousands of dollars in rent to the synagogue, which now claims we don't have any money. Same thing with membership that they denied. Those members were willing to pay dues. So there's, what we're saying, besides the nonsense that's going on from Jack and Stu, is, one, tell us what's going on, and two is consider having a community input that would allow for affordable housing, for some community space that the synagogue used to have. And one would think that a synagogue would want to continue that tradition. perhaps not.
As I understand it, the religious corporation law says that it's the membership who has to decide ultimately. And so, I don't think any of us here are in a position to say who's right and who's wrong. It's irrelevant to us. The membership who needs to, so if you're not being informed at the point of a vote, you can respond appropriately. But I can, to a degree, understand how the day-to-day negotiations may have to remain somewhat.
We're not asking day to day. I'm an attorney. I've done this kind of stuff. I know what you're talking about. I know what he's talking about. There's a difference between day-to-day reporting and a confidential communication versus telling members what the hell is going on. And I understand what you're saying too. It will be a membership. Jack controls the members. There are very few left, all elderly or just about. So we know how the vote's going to go. What we're hoping is the community board will see the need for a different type of building, a different type of facility there, one that involves the community. Also, for full disclosure, we're appealing to the Attorney General under the Religious Corporation Law.
As a past synagogue president, this whole conversation scares me, bothers me.
I hear you, man. I don't disagree.
I remember also when my synagogue, South Israel on Henry Hudson Parkway, merged with the South Israel on the concourse, negotiations were not shared until a proposal was put on the table. So, in fact, I think a lot of negotiations, we had no idea what was going on. But it's maybe 30 years ago. What do I remember? All right, there was a hand, that lady over here. Name, please.
My name is Laura Champion, and I have been involved in some of these discussions. And we were at first actually pleased to be able to be supportive, and as Jack admitted, and as we said, helped to provide some good ideas that were helpful. However, I was quite naive to think that once those ideas were accepted, we were then completely shut out. And so why should I be interested? I'm someone who's lived in this community for a really long time, and it is a very special community, in my opinion. It's where I raised my children. It's where I hope to grow old. It's where I feel it's one of the few places left, I think, given all the gentrification and things that are going on, where people who have different incomes, who are very diverse, have really been able to live in a very affordable, pleasant, green place with transportation. I mean, how many people are lucky enough to be in that kind of a neighborhood, multi-generational? In our building, which is right, butts this 3850, we have 3 generations living in the same building. It's pretty amazing, and it's pretty friendly, and it's pretty nice. And I like to keep the neighborhood like that. I know it has to change. We do need to have new housing, but as being part of the community board, to me, this is where democracy sort of happens. How can we collaboratively and collectively maintain and support a neighborhood like this by thinking about smart development, by thinking about mixed kinds of buildings, by thinking about how do we combine housing and the services that make it possible to stay in that community happily. And to me, one of the things that I found really delightful is that right next to me is this VCJC that has a synagogue, religious spaces, where people get married and, have happy, joyful things going on, and funerals and whatever, a senior center and a daycare center, and the potential to actually have even more. So I'm very sad about this not being able to work collaboratively, and I'm actually very angry at some of the ways that I feel that those of us that tried to help have been treated and disrespected. And I was very unhappy just now to hear Jack's characterization of Michael, who has been, in my opinion, nothing but kind and good, you know? And all of that, the question of whether or not that we didn't deal with the question of trees and the environment, that's actually not true. That's important too. But the most important thing is what happens to that building and what kind of a contractor do you want to work with. We also brought people to the table who were turned off. We brought Ford and Bedford, who's done work with you know, religious organizations and housing. They didn't even get a phone call. We brought Peter Cook from the Interfaith Council, who has dealt, you know, really gives advice. I know them because they've actually worked on a project that I'm familiar with upstate in Poughkeepsie. And he would have loved to meet and talk and try to give ideas and support. And they even have grants to help get lawyers and all that kind of stuff. No thanks, no support, and no follow through. So it leaves me with a really bad taste, and I can't understand why we can't work together, come up with something for the parts of this property that are not yet sold that could be so valuable for our community going forward. Market rate housing is bizarre to me. We have, quote, affordable housing, 130% or whatever it is. Do you know how much you have to make to get a studio? You have to have an income of at least $90,000 to get a studio apartment, and then it's close to $3,000. That's for affordable housing. How many people in our neighborhood in Kingsford could actually afford that? Now, is affordable housing going to be cheaper than that? I don't think so. What does that do to the character? What does it do to people who live there now, being able to stay, being able to have their kids live in the same neighborhood as them? I know it's a little bit beachy, but I just want to share that because I do think there's a way that we could be working more closely together for a better outcome.
Thank you, Laura. Well, I'm happy that we're all here tonight. I think the first step here in person, here online, I'm happy to see some of our elected officials came as well, because I think it's important that we're talking to each other. And if we don't talk to each other, then it's very easy to form separate camps and to begin to see each other as the other and not as what we are, which is neighbors. That being said, I don't want to comment on the nature of the proposal itself and that the VCJC is pursuing. I want to comment back to the nature of the vote. So this is not what I would characterize as a free and fair election. And I think it's important for the committee to understand this, because the whole premise hinges on, if the membership approves this, then
Sorry?
so I think the whole premise is, if the membership approves X, then we have to do X, right? That seems we have to do Y. What I have observed in these meetings, though, is they are conducted not in the spirit of a debate and what I would say a free and fair election, but they're designed to achieve a certain purpose. A tremendous amount of highly technical information is conveyed to an aging membership at high volume in a very, very, very short period of time, in such a way that's overwhelming. And it's conveyed with a tone of, in an apocalyptic tones that frightens older people. Some of the members of the congregation actually believe that they themselves could be personally liable if the congregation were to go bankrupt. So these are older folks, and they're frightened by the way these proceedings are being held. And so to alleviate that fear, they're willing to do effectively what the leadership of the synagogue is telling them to do. Documents are not provided beforehand, even at these major meetings. They're not made accessible. People need time to digest what's going on so they can make up their opinions. My understanding is also that the secretary of the synagogue has went around and canvassed individual members before these votes. It's just what I've heard, to try to get them to vote a certain way. I don't know if that's true, I'm just conveying it. My point here is that,
Don't say it.
Excuse me?
my point here is I'm not a lawyer, I'm not familiar with the, religious corporation law, but I'm sure the law is sage enough to recognize that there are differences between, elections that are truly, held freely to, reflect the spirit of a group of people, and those that are slanted and conducted in such a way as to achieve a certain purpose, which is, I think, my observations of how they've been carried out at the VCJC.
While I am pleased that this conversation is taking place, our hands are totally tied in this issue, because the internal politics is something we have absolutely zero control over. I don't know that any one of us or even want some kind of mediator to sit down with the group, but I'm personally caught between both arguments, both opinions, and while the open meetings law allows for executive session when certain issues come up, so it's not public, and you can discuss it openly. For example, I've been trying for years to get out of this place, and when something comes up where a potential site is available, we close the cameras and we have an executive session. So the public is not aware of what's going on. On the other hand, I think the degree that stuff can be shared, it's not my synagogue. The degree that things can be shared, there needs to be a venue to allow for that. It's an opinion. I have zero power. Bob, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it's clear from what we're hearing tonight that there's dissension within the congregation. There are people who feel aggrieved that information isn't being properly shared. All we can do is provide a forum for everybody to exchange their opinions and state their positions. Beyond that, we have no role. We can't adjudicate. It wouldn't be proper for us to do it, even if we had the ability to do it, which we don't, because none of us knows nearly as much as all of you do. So, as I say, we can provide a forum for conversation, but we can't resolve this issue.
That's a question. I'm not familiar with the workings of it. What about the issues that are not internal to the synagogue, but to the community, as Dan was saying, as I was saying? Issues about whether it's better for the community to have a certain type of housing, better for the community to have the community facilities. Do you have any say on that kind of stuff?
The property rights, zoning laws, which seem to be changing before our eyes, those curtail what a developer can and cannot do. Or trying to influence the agencies within the law is all that we have. So with this conversation, we're not talking about the big picture. We're kind of focusing in on the synagogue so far. So talk about that a little further. I apologize, I don't remember your name.
Carl Ford. I live up the street at 3850 Sedgwick Avenue. Obviously, there's something wrong with the synagogue. Obviously, it wouldn't be such a big discussion, but I wanted to focus on what we can do right now, because I've asked you this. I know that our representative is here. We want to change the zoning in this neighborhood. We want to downzone this neighborhood, okay? Like they did 2 blocks over on Orloff. I want to initiate that before the synagogue sells, before they put a permit in to build 3862 Sedgwick Avenue. Because what we have here, okay, and what's being built in this neighborhood is unacceptable. This has no context in this area, okay? I mean, who sits there and, like, sleeps at night after saying, oh, this is nice, I think I'll approve this? Who does that? There's a house right here that's not even in this picture. This gentleman here, this wall is closing up windows on his property. I just want to know what we can do to stop this from happening, because it's continually happening on Sedgwick Avenue, and it's going to change this neighborhood dramatically if that whole triangle becomes this. That synagogue wraps around to Stevenson Place, and there's another vacant lot there that they want to build on, the house on the corner. If those combined, you're going to have a huge mass of building on that triangle. That neighborhood will disappear as we know it, okay? That's what I'm here for, is what can we do to mold, at least if it's going to be developed, mold it into something that has context with the existing neighborhood. These are out of context. There's no trees here. This is like it was built on the moon. So, and these, if you go up Sedgwick Avenue, there's 5 more of these up there. Okay, there's just these, there's, here, Kleenex box, there, and then there's the neighbor. So, what I'm saying is that it's out of context, it's unacceptable, all right? And we have Dinowitz here, I want to put in, how do we initiate getting this down zone to not allow this to take place anymore? Because once that goes, that's it, okay? And you saw the neighborhood, you saw the trees, you saw the front yard setbacks, the side yard setbacks, the rear setbacks. This doesn't have any setbacks. Their setback is in the backyard that nobody can enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the guy that has the back window there. So that's what I want to do. The other thing is, this says it's 7 stories. And, you know, we all went to grade school. I see 8 levels here, not 7. How did that happen? Okay? That needs to be looked at. I know it's a done deal, but it says 7, but there's 8 here.
I will,
Where does it say 7?
Well, DOB
Innovative is
mentioned
not-
that.
Innovative is not here, but they will be here next week. The land use meeting on another issue. Some of these questions you're raising will be asked.
But it is. I mean, if you count each level, it goes 8. And it says 7 stories. You know, don't look at that over there. Look over here. All right? Oh, what is it saying? Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. It's 8 stories, not 7. I know it's only 1 story, but
Department of Buildings mentioned that at the last meeting, Marty, that it was 7 stories. In the application.
We thought the area was zoned R6.
Well, raise this question next week.
thank you.
Yes.
Oh, also,
That has-
how do we
Go,
move
go,
forward
go.
with downtown? That's the other thing.
What, Peter?
That's right.
As last week at the meeting, you said it takes of the representatives.
Limbo at this moment, that I explained to you also. December 5th, City Council is voting on City of Yes housing. And what we know about zoning today will not be the same thing a week from now. I'm not, is Eric on? I see Jeff is on.
No, I understand,
Well,
you know.
as far as I know, there are 2 processes I'm concerned about. One is, if we started today to try the down zone, I can guarantee you, Department of Buildings and/or City Planning will stall it. Period. Guarantee it, because I know we tried years ago, to work on a down zoning in another area, and it's still sitting on their desk. We spent a great deal of time with pictures and whatever. Chuck can tell you about it. It never happened. In fact, Chuck,
I'm here.
you want to address the down zoning concept? Please.
There is no chance whatsoever of getting the down zoning in time to avoid a problem, and the target should be the project and its weaknesses. So let me tell you why I say that. One, the process of downzoning takes upwards of a year. You have to go through the area, photograph it, make a presentation, get an architect on it, put it into city planning, negotiate with them, and hope and pray something happens. If we didn't have the assemblyman we have here, we wouldn't have any of the downzoning that has benefited this community, ever. Number one. Number two, this city planning commission doesn't give a damn about the Bronx. It is in the process of trying as hard as it can to get rid of all of the natural areas in the Bronx and elsewhere in the city of New York. Doesn't give a damn. It's owned and operated by a bunch of guys who oughtn't to be there, who oughtn't to be keeping their phones either. So it's no good. That's number two. So now you have the reality from my standpoint, from my personal opinion, based upon an awful lot of years here. It's just opinion. Having said that to you, here is where the issues are that you need to look at. One, let me just get rid of another issue. The religious corporation law is a mess. I have litigated it. I understand good portions of it. The religious corporation law is something you have no standing in terms of intruding your views at this stage. There's one place that you can be effective. If you communicate your views to the Attorney General's office, I don't care who the Attorney General is, that staff will look at it in a nanosecond and see if there's anything wrong. They are good. So if you have a genuine concern and view, write to the Office of the Attorney General's and to the committee, to the Division on Charity and Religious Affairs. They will look into anything that you have that has any substance at all. And since this does involve the religious corporation law, it has to be approved ultimately by the Supreme Court, Bronx County. So if you start it now, you've got a shot at that end. Now, let me go to where you are. The issue that you have, from my standpoint, and I don't mean to preempt Marty and the committee, I really don't. That's why we have a subcommittee, is simply, from my standpoint, this is slapdash put together building that troubles me in three respects. What they are were: one, when they were looking for help, they were very cooperative. Now they're all closed for the week. Number two, that I find really troublesome. I really do. Number two, this sounds to me like a degree of construction and evolution of that neighborhood in a fashion that is slapdash and not for the benefit of the public interest. That troubles me more than anything else. And what I would urge is people stand back and think about it. How is this going to help the city of New York, the borough of the Bronx, or your community? I haven't figured that one out yet. Number three, there are bits and pieces of this that are really individually troublesome. So, for example, I now learned today that there may be, and I don't know that this is a fact, by the way, I do not know it's a fact, there may be a landmarks issue on the Stevenson Place building. A little while ago, after talking to Marty about it earlier tonight, I communicated with the district service manager and asked her to get hold of landmarks tomorrow and buildings and asked them to put it on ice pending the land use meeting next week, and not to do anything that deals with the landmarks issue until that's done. Because I think that's one way of putting this thing on ice for a short while. And I've just lost you. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, I just don't have the picture, which is okay. What I suggest to you is what Marty has said to you from the beginning. Get out of your own shoes of your own living in the neighborhood, because while that is critical to your having the expertise of the neighborhood, it also doesn't give you an overview. It doesn't give you the bird's eye view to say, why is this bad for the neighborhood? When you have a neighborhood that is congested, when you have a neighborhood that has more housing per square foot than it should have, where you have this kind of mass all of a sudden, you know you're going to have trouble. It's inevitable. And so this has not been planned in cooperation with the city of New York. It's just been put together. Now, those are my views. They're just my views. That's why I wanted somebody in the committee to take a good hard look at it. But I have to tell you, you really need to drill down and take a look at what are the ways in which this does not advance the community. So, for example, when you have every inch of space surrounding that portion of the reservoir, then you have a situation in which environmental concerns are really accelerated. You have a situation in which crowding and congestion is accelerated. And what do you do with the cars? So those are the kind of issues that in the normal course of events would make some sense. Unfortunately, we're dealing here with a city planning commission that is in the process of ramming through a proposed series of changes. I must tell you, I spent the past 50 plus years in government in one form or another. And in that time, I have heard it mentioned time and again by those in the executive branch that they'd love to see an end to the city council. I join them. I do. I do. Because they just don't pay attention. I exclude from that one member of the council, that's ours. That aside, putting that aside, I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I'm going to contribute to every primary candidate against an incumbent office holder, and I'm going to raise the money to help them knock them off. Take my word for it. It's not easy, but it ain't hard either. This is really bad. They don't care. They don't have the wit or the. I went through all of this today to help our councilman, who's the only one standing up there with the guts to fight. But it's awful. Those are what you're fighting. I have to admit to you, I am a terribly depressed person after all these years in government and what's happening to the city of ours. I don't like it one bit. I don't know how it's going to withstand even another 14 months of this code. But having said that to you, you have a shot. We are willing to help you. Our community board wants to be helpful because we believe that it's critical to this community that every part of it stand on its feet and have respect. We have a limitation on what we can do. Our chair, Julie Reyes, wants to do that. I want to do it. Marty wants to. Everyone on this committee does. But you've got to help us in a really tangible way. Why is this piece no good? Why is that piece no good? And if you can pull all that stuff together by Monday, bring it to land use. Let's get it done. I apologize.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you. I see Deb wants to say, before Deb, yes, sir. Your name?
Peter Stand. I'm a resident of Sedgwick Avenue, 2 blocks north of the synagogue, south rather of the synagogue. I just wanted to point out, this is on Carl's point, this is not just an R6 zone, it's an R6B zone, which means it's a contextual zone. And I understand that that means that the buildings have to conform to certain height limitations. It is a contextual zone, and we just bandy that term about. But the importance of the synagogue, the importance of the community services that the synagogue renders is essential to the nature of what this community is. And if we think about what that means as a contextual place, and the reservoir, and open space around it, and the need for services, and, you know, what attracted me when I moved to this neighborhood, although I originally came from Marshall Parkway, I moved here 38 years ago. It's because I could afford it, and I could afford to raise my children there, and I could afford to start a business here in the city because I could afford it. Market rate housing, and I understand that we need to ensure the diversification of incomes of people who live in our buildings, but there certainly are formulas where you can have both affordability and market rate within the same place. I know the community board has to conform and adhere to regulations in the zoning code of the city of New York, but you are in a position to write recommendations. And to reflect on what Mr. Mergler said, reflect on what makes this place, Van Cortlandt Village, Kingsbridge Heights, the unique place that it is. And maybe the architecture, and I agree with Carl, there's been a lot of garbage built on Sedgwick Avenue, you know, that is just awful. These aren't, I mean, they're buildings, but they kind of look like outhouses. But I think that the character and nature of this community and the reservoir and its relationship to the park and this mixture of apartment buildings and 1- and 2-family homes makes it the beautiful place it is. So I guess I'm requesting that the subcommittee and the land use committee kind of reflect on the nature and the context of this community in relationship to the type of zoning that exists on this street. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the motion. Carl, did you get the answer to your question?
Kind of, I guess.
Okay. Would you like to speak, Brian?
I'm not sure what to.
You have two hands up.
Deb has a hand.
There's a sub-conference going on. Do you want to speak?
He lives next door to this thing.
I think if I may, you know, when we talk about theoretically, this entire triangle of land could be developed
Yes.
by innovative development. That's the party that the BCJC is currently working with right now, and also the party developing along Henry Hudson Parkway. I think Mr. Clarle's experience here is pertinent because he has the lived experience of his house being adjacent to the current site where innovative is developing. And I'd like him, if he's willing, to share a little bit about what that is like, knowing his family has been in this community for over 80 years.
Good evening. My name is Brian Clarle. I'm not the sole owner of 3868 Sedgwick Avenue. It's a family. It's a group of family. But I'm their representative, for lack of a better candidate at the moment. What I can speak to is doing business with Innovative. And what I can tell you is since I was first approached about 1.5 years ago by someone who didn't identify that they were working for Innovative, that their whole plan has always been to get Van Cortlandt Jewish Center, to get the former library building, to get 3870, the brick house that's being torn down, to buy my family's property, and 3862, they tried to buy, and originally tried to buy Stevenson Place, 69, and then 67, I believe, belongs to Van Cortlandt Jewish Center. So they were trying to buy this whole chunk up. They were, it might be the normal operating procedure of any developer, but they weren't very forthcoming. They tried to scare me, tell me, oh, well, we're going to build right around you, you're going to be in a canyon. Might very well happen, okay? But they also didn't, they certainly, even though they were told the property was not for sale, they kept making offers, very low offers, I came to find out later. And then as soon as they controlled the property and got their permits, they were threatening that they had to have access to my property to accomplish their goals of building, and they were going to take me to court and sue me if I didn't give them access. And they sent me a very non-detailed contract. Now, although that house has been in my family for 83 years, and I have lived there, I'm not a developer. I'm not very knowledgeable about the way things are done in the city of New York in terms of building. After I turned for help to an attorney at no small expense, I found that they had omitted the fact that this has to be negotiated. And only if we don't negotiate could they take me to court and force access to my property. Once I knew that and I engaged an attorney, they were certainly, oh, we'll cooperate. As soon as we got into negotiations and they got just the beginning of an agreement, access agreement, then they shut down. I thought someone mentioned something here that they came to a couple of meetings and they were cooperative while they were looking for something, but as soon as you need something, we don't have that paperwork available, it'll take a while, you'll have to wait for it. Very one-sided. They were using fear, my personal opinion, as they approached my family, is that they were using fear and intimidation and holding back knowledge, sin of omission, to just put us, in a bad position so they could profit. I understand making a profit. I don't feel when there's more to consider than just, you're not selling a used car here, you're not buying a dozen eggs. It affects a lot more people than just my family. And for them to conduct themselves in this way, for lack of a better word, just shady, I don't know, it may not be criminal, but it's certainly not very ethical.
Use the word access twice. What do they mean by access?
I'm learning
Easement,
these things myself, but in New York State, when you're building next to a property,
Right.
so in this case, 3870, where they're doing the demolition, would be right next to my property. They have an obligation to protect my property from damage. So to do that, depending on what they're doing, they may have to put up scaffolding, sidewalk sheds, retaining walls, different things, so they don't damage my property. And to do that, they might have to come onto my property to do that. You follow me? They've been trampling my property, they've been trespassing before we have an access. They've been doing things ahead of having an access plan. For instance, if you notice, they're doing demolition. We were all notified that they were going to do hand demolition. I don't know what the exact definition of that is, but I'm quite sure that it doesn't mean any big equipment. Today, they were using a hydraulic hammer on a excavator. That's that machine that goes pound, 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 pound. Uses it to break up concrete, rocks, and demolish stuff. My building is shaking like crazy. I got video of a glass of water on a windowsill. It looks like a scene from Jurassic Park. I don't know if you all know the movie, but it's quite clear. And it happens to be, you can see the excavator in the background. It's really quite dramatic. That should have been covered under this access plan. When we negotiate an access plan, among other things, is that we have an engineer come in and put a variety of monitors on a building. Some of those are crack monitors to see if a crack will get bigger, vibration monitors. Now, the engineer, hired again at my expense, has already determined it's an older building, so it's a brittle building. So when they do their excavation, we have to have these monitors in place to see if it's putting any pressure on the building, anything. They have a threshold of levels of pressure. I can't tell you technically what that is. They don't have that access, so what the hell? They'll just do their excavation on the other side. They'll do their rock pounding. They'll still create these vibrations, but it's not right next to my property, and there's no monitor up yet, so we don't know how the level of vibration that they're causing.
Let me interrupt
And
you.
so
Let me interrupt you as a former commissioner of buildings, okay? Here's what
certainly, please.
this is Merdlin. Let me tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna make a list of all of the problems that you have encountered on this site. Are you still on, Artie? Artie?
No, he's not.
All right, make it up. Are you there, Farah?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Get it to the community board office tomorrow. Farah, call buildings, get an inspector over there now. Point out to them that these people are doing a construction job that is more in the nature of harassment than it is in the purpose of demolition. But you have to let them have a list of all of the problems you have, and we'll get on them. There's something tangible.
You have to go,
May I ask, is that every little thing?
really have to call 311. You gotta make a list.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Cross things off, you can make a big list as you can.
Longer than that, I don't
They didn't say hello.
Brian, you made that list and forwarded it already.
I have,
work on
Look,
yeah.
you have here the single most effective member of the state legislature. He will work with you to get this done. But you guys got to, instead of giving me a speech, give us a piece of paper that shows what's, so we can go ahead and do it. There's an ancient Greek expression. It's called tachlis. We need them. We need the details so that we can do something. No speeches. Let's get the details. I apologize. I apologize for yelling at you. I apologize for getting hot under the collar. As my friend Dinowitz tells me, I do it too often anyway. But that beside that point, we've got to do here to get you some relief. And the only way we can is if you help us. Now I have to go out. I gotta take.
You want to respond?
I'm sorry, Marty, to interrupt.
Jeff?
Well, I wasn't going to speak because I really just wanted to listen and get as much information as I can. I'm also very upset to learn that Nais Gonzalez, who is on my staff, is going to go back to my office tomorrow and say, how come we're not closing for the entire Thanksgiving week? Everybody else is doing it. And I'm going to say, well, maybe everybody else is not doing it. So I don't think most people outside the area understand, and certainly the administration, the city administration does not understand that this area is a jewel like very few other neighborhoods. Think about it. Think about this. Within a couple of blocks of this site, you got the amalgamated houses, which is historic, which is the first such housing development in the entire country like that. You have the first Mitchell-Lama in the entire state in Park Reservoir. You have a wonderful co-op right across the street, 3850, which I think used to be part of one of the of Park Reservoir. You have Shalom Aleichem. These are historic places. You have beautiful private houses that are on the chopping block now. This neighborhood is really like no other. And what's happening, and I just want to say this for the record, because this is not going to stop the project by me saying this today. What's happening here, or what looks like it may happen, is abominable. It's appalling. It's disgusting, in my opinion, because right now, even without the city of yes, it seems that developers can do whatever the heck they want and get away with it, that there are no rules right now before they even get the carte blanche to do everything that they want. And the idea that the real estate community, that developers will be able to steamroll this change in the zoning in order to be able to build anywhere and everywhere, to dismantle the SNAD and do all kinds of other horrible things is disgusting. But this particular project, think about it for a minute. They're going to build on a site where you have these beautiful, beautiful homes that have been around for, I don't know, a century maybe, where you have the shul, where you have other assets for our community. They're going to take it down, and they want to build what? What are we going to actually get out of it? Are we going to get affordable housing? Are we going to get decent housing? Is the housing that they're going to put up further strain the neighborhood by not having enough parking? How is it going to impact the school? None of this that they want to do seems to me to be something that's good. But unfortunately, something being bad doesn't mean they can't do it. because that's the rules right now. And the rules in the future may be that if something is bad, they're going to do it and the city's going to help them along with it. I think it's important for everybody to stand up and say, no matter what side you are on, as far as what happens with the Van Cortlandt Jewish Center, you think that this development is not good for the people in our community and for the potential people that may move into our community. And by the way, it wasn't too many years ago that I secured hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of state funding so that the Marshall Monfield Community Center could have the early childhood program at the shul on the, I guess that's the second and the third floors. And they provided important programs for little kids for a long time now. So all these things that are happening, we're gonna lose that. Are there going to be positive community assets going in there? Are we going to have early childhood programs? Are we going to have any other educational or other community things going on? Well, I think the answer is no, because we're going to have whatever housing that they're going to build. And I think one thing I've learned over many years is whatever Merdla says, pay attention and listen. And I think you should take his advice. Maybe there are roadblocks that can be put up. Maybe there are things that can slow it down. I don't know. But I do know that the attack on our community, and it's happening probably throughout the city, but this is just the latest phase of what has been happening for a while now. I don't know, was it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I came before the community board and asked the board to take action for a downzoning in Kingsbridge Heights along Webb Avenue, along Claflin Avenue, and that whole neck of the woods, 195th Street, 197th Street, because I saw then that they were going to swoop in and try to buy up the beautiful single-family homes that were over there. I know that Chuck Merdla was trying to be helpful with that. I know Rosemary Ginty from the board put a considerable amount of time into going there, taking pictures, showing what we had over there. That's just several blocks, really, less than a mile from this site. And if you look along Sedgwick Avenue, you can see what's been happening in the past several years there. One by one, the private houses are coming down, and it's being replaced by, well, I don't want to insult any architect or any developer, but frankly, none of those buildings are terribly appealing to me. So this, this particular location, and I've lived in the neighborhood almost my entire life. I've lived in Kingsbridge Heights and Kingsbridge for I'm not going to say how many years, but it's a lot of years. And it keeps getting more. And then the streets like where Peter Stan lived, that whole area. I mean, this is an incredible place. So anything that can be done to stop it, to slow it down, to make it more difficult, to trip them up, I think that we have to do it. I'm not sure what all those steps would be, but I know we have some of the greatest experts in the city on this board, and most other boards do not have that. So anything that I could do, that my office can do to be helpful in even the smallest way, I want to do, because honestly, I'm really very sad over this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there are a number of people who want to speak. I've been too rude. So let me first call on Jack.
Yeah. Well, a couple of questions, really. One of the points Peter made is that that's the makeup of the neighborhood, and we want diversified population, for lack of a better word, affordable. People could afford affordable, but not market. People can afford market. Has anybody studied what the actual distribution of rent or distribution of incomes as it is now is, and what it would be under either Innovative's plans as announced or under alternative plans that the group, many in the group here, are proposing? Well, that's just one question. I don't know if you have that data, but I can't see you going forward with this without that data. In terms,
What the answer to your question?
at some point, not in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, okay.
In terms of Mr. Ford's comment about this building not fitting in the neighborhood, how is it different from the row of buildings directly across the street? How is it different from the building on the other side of the Van Cortlandt Jewish Center? It's got more glass. It's not bigger than, it's not more imposing than. It's more of the same, I think. So, you know, that you are not being treated right by Innovative, based on what you said, I'm not gonna disagree with. I honestly am surprised to hear. Because our experience has been very different.
What a surprise.
And whether it's, as you say, because they're still courting us, maybe. But, the access agreement and your engineer should be on their dollar.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, but that's a process.
I don't know.
So,
I
personal expenses on my part to engage these people and start the ball rolling.
This is an aside on my part. I don't wanna get into the middle of it, please.
Okay.
Paul, then Bob, then,
The,
Deb, yeah.
you know, Laura has said she, you know, we started out well, and then she got cut out. The people in the group were a mix of members and non-members, and I asked if they signed a non-disclosure agreement, keeping anything we discussed within the group. Michael Stoller signed it immediately. The rest of them refused. I did not feel comfortable pursuing any further discussions based on that. I did in fact call the head of the Ford and Bedford Association, and he didn't return my call. The concept of faith-based housing honestly leaves me cold, is what the Council on Churches was described as promoting.
No,
No,
not
no,
true.
I'm sorry, not.
That's so.
It was described poorly.
And you heard poorly.
Got a pause or,
Yeah, that's you know, I was on a roll for a while, but I got derailed. On to somebody else.
Stoller?
Yeah, I wonder if I could speak to any of the comments that the assembly member made, besides trying to attack everybody's piece one by one with the nonsense that he makes up about the faith-based housing. No one said that. Maybe if he had actually talked to the Council of Churches, he would have found out what they do. What we're asking for, in terms of his research, is a chance to do what we thought we were getting at the beginning, which is have the community, including the elected official, including you guys, and us sit down with these guys to talk about what's the best thing to do, and not have it railroaded, and to say to him, oh, Innovative treats us differently than you, give me a break. And that's the kind of crap we've been getting. Forgive me, but that's what we've been getting from these guys ever since they shut it down. I signed the NDA. I was cut out too.
So Marty, so I have two hats in this particular ring. The first one is just as the chair of the board of 3850 Sedgwick, or the president of the board of 3850 Sedgwick. I want to correct respectfully Assemblymember Dinowitz. 3850 Sedgwick is the first of the Mitchell-Lama. We sold the property to Park Reservoir to build after we built, and they built the year after us. So we have a very close history with Park Reservoir, but we were the first building of the two. You know, as a resident, you know, nearby, I have a lot of concern. I think Daniel's already expressed this about the elimination of some of the commercial space on this in this area. We would be losing several feet of storefront. With the current design, not including the Jewish Center and whatever is done with that, but I'm a bit disturbed by the storefront or the current, street level of the building they're proposing, because it has a garage entranceway that seems to me as though it's going to come into contact with the street trees that are existing there, including a 26-inch oak and two other trees that have been planted approximately 5 or 6 years ago. And that when I look at the permitting requirements for street trees, and this is where I'm starting to put my parks chair hat on a little bit, I have to ask for just guidance from folks on land use who are more experienced with this, but that the permitting requirements require 7 feet of clearance from the street trees. And so, I don't see a pavers plan, but when I, look at the plans that they presented, it doesn't look like the trees on their site plan line up with the trees on their building plan. And it makes me wonder if the existing trees would be impacted. It doesn't seem like the existing trees would afford them enough clearance to have this driveway that they're planning for. I don't think any of us want a 26-inch diameter oak to be taken down in order to put in a driveway. And so I think we need to look. I think we need to look into. I think I'm hearing what Chuck is saying, which is we need to look at the plan as they're presenting it, and put our common sense hats on and say, okay, how is this possible, and how is this is them providing some magical thinking about what the rules are. So, I don't know if you can give some guidance about how street trees are normally part of this permitting process, but my understanding was existing street trees needed to be kind of built around essentially, particularly when they're old like this and substantial. Is that true?
Not entirely, Deb. This is not a SNAD area, and it's a very different appraisal. Part of it is nobody wants to, and government wants to take ownership of the issue of street trees. City planning was supposed to be in charge of planning for communities. It clearly isn't doing that. Department of Parks can only jump in when they are given a limited amount of resources to do it. They are not getting those resources. One after another, the various agencies of the city, starting in the last administration, decided it was more expeditious for them to do the kind of government that they're doing now. And we're paying the price for it now. City will. I have to tell you, one of the things that occurs to me is maybe we ought to, in the service of the land use committee, bring in the development entities in Westchester, Rockland, and Orange to show people where you can live when this city goes down the tubes in the not too distant future. That's how depressed I am. I've worked for this since 1965 as a volunteer. And I want you to know, as of this moment, I think it was been a waste of time. And that's the saddest.
No. That's sad to hear. That's hard to hear.
Bob?
Yeah, if I'm reading these plans correctly, for 3870, the front of the building, the street wall, is going to come out to the property line. Is that correct?
I am only in a position to relay what was said to me. I am not reading the plans. I didn't know what building that was until it was clarified.
Negotiate to his side.
But this is the first I've seen of it.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is it will not be at the property line.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be set back?
I am not in a position to testify on that. That's my understanding.
Oh, well, yeah.
Well,
property line
you
goes to
did
here.
say, let me just finish, Daniel. You did say, comparing this building to, you said, how is it different from the buildings across the street? The buildings across the street are set back. They have gardens in the front, bushes. I don't know if there are actual trees there, but they are much greener. And they look much more attractive than this drawing looks. I can tell you that. This drawing looks like the buildings farther south on Sedgwick, which do come all the way out and have nothing in the front. So you asked the question, how is this building different? And I think it's quite different.
Okay.
The plan says 7-foot setback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but exactly what that means, I don't know. But, and it would be good to find out before it's built.
Yeah. I thought the zoning required a 10-foot setback, so just FYI.
As Deb pointed out, that as I look at the diagram, I see an existing tree. I have no idea the caliper, and a bench or something blocking the driveway. Yes.
To the point of the setback in the front yard that you're talking about, the older buildings that have the greenery in front, what I'm seeing is that the new buildings, they may have a setback, I'm not sure, I've never measured, but that it's all concrete. They don't provide any landscaping in the front. And I think that's a huge difference in I think the streetscape that I'm looking for. This building doesn't describe any sort of green space on this. It's all asphalt. If you go up to south of here, south of where we are, those new buildings are all paved in. And
All right, we're almost at the 9 o'clock hour, where we go into section 3. I'm gonna call on Abba.
Very short comment.
If there's nobody else, we'll go into section 3.
I did want to add that the tree with the 26-inch caliper has already been damaged by the developers. There's a large scrape at the base of the tree. There are no protective fences around these trees at all. Currently, some tape is being secured by a chair and a child's basketball hoop. That's the state of the situation. I think it goes without saying, these trees, 26-inch oak is irreplaceable. This was planted 80 years ago, at least. Yeah, Carl has pictures of the tape. And so maybe it's a reflection of the fact that they don't care because they're planning to cut it down anyway. So why bother to keep it in good health?
or they'll kill it.
Or kill it.
That's just,
Or
that might
kill
have-
it. But, I mean, yeah. No, please, Brian, yeah.
May I add to that about the tree? The site safety plans, which are filed with the city, show a barrier around each tree, simply 4 vertical, probably 2x4s, with a horizontal thing around it. Those haven't been installed yet, they've already damaged the tree. Good to their word.
All right, Karen, the last speaker.
So I have a couple of things to say. I'll try to do it quickly. First of all, I did send a note. There was something somewhere in the Something Now program of the Department of Buildings that you have to have a tree every 25 feet. The city just gave a whole bunch of money to the Parks Department Forestry Program, and they're going to put trees in. And the fact that the guy is coming, the deputy or whoever is coming to do a survey, I think that's very good. Those trees have to be put in, and that's what's going to happen. That's number one. Number two, I will implore, I know this is going to be really hard, and if you think this meeting is hard, what I'm going to tell you is going to be even harder, even though it sounds like it's so simple. You have to document what you're saying. You have to call 311 every morning when you wake up and you see something wrong. Every time you walk by and you see something, just go on your phone and call 311. It may take you about a half an hour, 45 minutes to explain to the person on the other side what's going on, but nobody is monitoring anything. The building department is not coming and looking unless you call 311. The DPs are coming and looking unless you call 311. Everybody in the neighborhood needs to call 311. And then the last thing is, this area has a terrible runoff problem. I mean, if you just walk on the street, I mean, I know it's a mess now, on Sedgwick Avenue, you can see that the runoff has eroded by each one of the trees, by the sidewalk, which is now up and down, like holes everywhere. It is unbelievable. If they put concrete to the front of that and just keep it going like that, it is going to be a major flood in their basement and other people's basements, because you can't control water once it has an idea of what it wants to do. This is, you should be asking for their stormwater plan. You should be requesting that of every single developer. I want to see your stormwater plan, and I don't know what the, is it as a right project?
Yes.
Yes.
Does it has no approvals that it needs? Then you have to get the stormwater plan and you need to look at it and you need to participate in it, because there is no more room in the sewer, either there in Cortlandt Village or down the hill where it's going to end up. There's just not enough room in the sewer, and they're not going to be able to fix that part because it's up on top of the hill. So between the runoff and the sewer, and I would say also, I would think that that rock has got to be something else at this particular point, although I know a lot of rocks are cleaned up. But also, I'm pretty sure that the forest section that was there was designed by, I forget the guy who did all the layout over there. The area was laid.
Frederick Falls.
Yeah, and so some of those things that, you know, the beautiful trees, all different kinds, it was just fantastic. And so I think, you know, you have to concentrate on those kinds of things. And you guys need to really identify and document pictures, videos, send them to the DEP, send them to the DOB, whatever you see, take a picture and do something with it.
Thank you, Sharon. As I mentioned to Abba during our walk concerning two houses that this gentleman, sorry, I forgot your name,
Brian Clarl.
even though I emailed you and we never crossed again. I suggested doing an anecdotal. Everything that happens, write it down. And not remember what happened. You do it right now, remember what happened, but you want it at contemporaneously. As it happens, write it down. But to Karen's suggestion of making sure you contact 311 and putting it on the public record is extremely important. Okay, I lied to one more speaker.
Oh, thanks. Just a quick question. So, you know, everything we've been saying is great, but is there actually a way to speak to the developers and actually negotiate this? Like, I don't see them here, and how do we?
How do we speak to the synagogue and have them?
Okay, the answer to your question is they are not here. They will be here next week. They still need us for another project.
They
and
lost me.
They what, Chuck?
They lost me.
They must be.
They've lost me.
Okay, so I plan to raise some of the issues discussed tonight. Then I lied again, and then we're finished.
So we're all talking about slowing it down. The Assembly member specifically used those words, and we need to talk to the innovator, but we're talking to the people who could slow it down today, Jack and Stu. So you're slowing it down, you're listening to the Assembly member, you're listening to the community, or not?
I don't have to respond to you, but they've heard what they've heard, and but as much as we want to be helpful, it is internal. And I hope you guys can talk.
And we tried.
Well, as important as I am, I hope you guys will talk. Frightened is not because I said before, as a past synagogue president, I'd hate to be in this situation for lots of reasons. Certainly seeing the synagogue disappear is a terrible thought. But there's got to be some way you can share and communicate and move forward. But I'm going to close this section now. Now it's just for the four of us to talk. You're welcome here. You have to leave.
Okay.
I'm not soliciting other conversation, just the committee is going to talk. So we have, I don't think we're prepared for a resolution. What I'm thinking of doing is, first of all, to thank Adriana for taking copious notes, which is going to translate somehow into minutes, which I hope to get as quickly as possible. And as soon as Farah, oh, by the way, Farah, if you can arrange for that tour from the forestry people as soon as possible.
They're supposed to get back to us, but I will.
Will you notify us? Sarah, will you notify us when the tour will be on?
No, that's not for the community.
Okay, that's
An
fine.
internal
Okay,
thing.
that's fine, thank you. Yeah.
When we get an answer, everyone will know.
Okay, thank you.
As soon as I'll start beforehand, but as soon as I get from Indiana, I will put a summary together, which I'm hoping to present in writing to land use next week. And I'll get it to you collectively as soon as possible for input. Because as great as I am, I'm sure I'll miss a few thousand things. Problems we have, just to summarize, in no particular order. Stormwater, that, there is a question I asked of, Innovative, and they threw me off basically, because you have the questions I asked and the answers they responded. But what Karen just said concerning the runoff into the sewage, we're not talking about one building. We're talking about potentially other buildings that will also add to that runoff. And which is a problem down the hill, more so than up the hill, but it's a problem that needs to be addressed. We have the issue with the synagogue that we cannot resolve. Hopefully, the conversation will go somewhere besides the tape. Innovation will get a copy of my summary also, in which I will try to outline as much as possible what we heard, what we believe. What I didn't mention commercial space. It's a concern. The idea of perhaps, unless they're looking at the synagogue for something, if they ever get to that point. But the whole idea of a community facility not come up at all. We're talking about right now we're talking about one building. And it was pointed out that obviously they have not made room for community facility. They have not worried about community facility. And they're not worried about, so far as I know, displacing what already exists. Okay, the neighborhood we need to talk about in our summary. We're trying to protect everything from that forestry corner to the stones. Having just been on another subcommittee dealing with the Riverdale Towers on Riverdale Avenue, and the concern those neighbors had as they were chopping away stone. That building, the next door neighbor is much newer, but they complained about shaking. They want things falling off the walls. They complained about whatever, and we try to work as closely as we can. And of course, Chuck and I received, thanks to Laura, we received a copy of how Stagg took what they planned to be a market rate facility that they were constructing, and now it's going to be an SRO. So we know that problem quite close. Is there anything I have not mentioned in the things that we need to emphasize? Dan? Now, one thing I didn't know, and maybe Dan, you want to do some research, please, into the idea of, write it down, the contextual nature.
I mean, it says it's R6A. I've never heard of R6B or that it's called R.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing, Marty, you know, some of the environmental issues, the street trees, the wall, which is, as we've discussed, retaining wall for Fort Independence Park, but does that wall also relate to the berm that is retaining around the reservoir? You know, there are some DEP issues there, and also in the street trees is Bronx Forestry, part of the Parks Department.
I plan to get a draft, I'll share a draft letter with you, all of you, tomorrow, to go to DEP. And then we'll get it all out of the office once we've agreed. What it says, and is there anything I have not, and I said I wouldn't, but I'll solicit, is there anything from the group, is there anything I did not list that we should be focusing on? Having said that,
I had one thing, I just wanted to investigate, we look into the 7 stories versus the 8 stories.
Yeah, well, that was on a different list, but you're right.
I'm showing, this drawing here says a 7-story building, okay? It's 7-story circle, and this, if you see my writing, it shows 1 through 8. Okay, so.
That's, zoning. And, going back to the survey, the study that was done by the Cultural Resource Survey, the only buildings, I think, well, he mentioned, Chuck mentioned Stevenson Place. Are your buildings potentially,
Only a landmark to my family, as far as I know.
so there's no pursuing on your part anyway, that it
I
might.
don't know what constitutes how you would landmark a building. There's no famous architect related to it that I'm aware of. There's no famous resident. If you just like it.
How old is the building?
The building, there's a little dispute about it. I believe it was built in 1904. My family's owned it since 1941, 83 years.
Okay.
At least one continuous family member in the building.
So, a point, having had a conversation with the chair of city planning, right after Adams was elected, they are, particularly in the Bronx, looking at potential, you don't need to have a famous building or a famous architect. You know, for instance, tenements, which are dreadful to live in, are now hallowed buildings in the city because we have very few of them from a historical context. And so I'm obviously very familiar with your building because when I walk down the street to the supermarket, geez, you know. So I think it is significant, but city planning is also looking at and beginning to, particularly for the Bronx, the cultural relevance of communities. This was a conversation about Lower Sedgwick Avenue, the birth of hip-hop, there's a particular building, and I was told there is no architectural distinction there. There's nothing relevant there at all in terms of architecture. However, it is incredibly culturally relevant to the city. And so, to preserve a building or to go on landmarks, if you go to nyc.gov and then landmarks, you can see what the procedure is. It's pretty direct.
Whatever the outcome.
For your building in particular, I mean, you know.
Whatever the outcome may be, you're filing for the outside of the building. I have no idea what the inside is. You may have changed everything from light bulbs to whatever, but from the outside of the building, might be extremely helpful in this process.
I just wanted to build on, I just wanted to build on one thing that, Peter said, because, you know, we've talked a lot about what we don't want, but what might we want here. And I just wonder if we could start to talk to each other and think about other models for how this area of land might look. For example, Denishon House, currently owned by the synagogue, at 67 Stevenson Place, is of incredible importance to the dance community. It was the first freestanding house of modern dance in the United States. What if that became a cultural center for Bronx youth, where you could have you know, kids learning dance there, things like that. You know, the synagogue could benefit from an arrangement like that, either by selling the land to a cultural nonprofit or maybe leasing it to them. And then it seems like everybody would win from that. You know, the synagogue would income or capital to meet its needs. The neighborhood would benefit because you would have preserved green space and an important piece of culture. And then finally, people in the Bronx would benefit. There'd be a place for kids to dance. There'd be a place for kids to do art, you know, in whatever form that takes. So I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, you know, a real estate developer, but I don't know how to make things like that happen that I think are, instead of lose, 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 I think things like that are win, win, win. So there are people on this call who are much more experienced in those sorts of complex negotiations than I am, but I just want to take a step back and maybe paint a picture of what a really good outcome might look like, and maybe we can all think about if there's some way to
Did you tell
achieve
me
something
at
like
some
that.
point that there was an attempt to landmark that building in a way?
Don't know.
There was in the past, I don't, it didn't go through, but I don't know what the circumstances are. But when I found out that that's what that was, and I used to be a dancer, and I studied all that stuff with those kind of techniques, and I was wowed. And it is really, I mean, there's so much that we don't get in the Bronx because we're the, you know, we're the lost borough. But it is, from a historical point of view, really extraordinary, because the Dennis Schoen Company was probably the first major modern dance company in the world that got Martha Graham started and, you know, all kinds of other folks that came after that. So, again, I mean, if, you know, you can imagine things, doesn't mean that you're gonna get there. But on the other hand, if you don't imagine things, well, then you'll never get there. So,
Exactly.
I think the idea, and I wish, again, that there's a way of talking that, that we could really think about how to do things that works for the synagogue and works for the community and is economically and fiscally helpful to everybody as well as culturally important for the community. That's all I want.
I'm going to close the meeting. I'll ask for a motion of adjournment, but before I do that, I want to thank everyone who's been here, online or in person, mostly in person. Thank you. Nobody had to be here. You came, and with the hope, and my hope also, that we could find some way, at least amongst ourselves, to come to some kind of a unity of thought. Innovative is a whole other issue, how to get them to come to a thought. But you're welcome to Zoom in, or there's not much room next week for the land use meeting. It is my hope, it's on Rosh Chodesh, Chaverim Kol Yisrael. I'm hoping you can find within yourselves some method to discuss the weather, to discuss something that you can come to an agreement that your interests are all the same. I think everyone in this room, whether they're Jewish or not, wants to see that building survive.
People not Jewish in this room?
Consensus, nor do I intend to. By the way, Chaver means in Israel we're all brothers.
Thanks for hearing us out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for allowing us to hear you out.
The center, the Van Cortlandt Center, there's a book that everybody should want to read. It's called The Miracle on Intervale Avenue by Jack Kugelman.